Well, because of tonight being a little bit smaller, I'm just going to kind of sit down with everybody and just kind of be relaxed, if that's cool with y'all. Do things a little bit differently. So with that being said, Isabel, if you wouldn't mind starting us off with that video. This is why we were a couple minutes late.
Oh my God, he did that just to cut in front and stop. Oh my God, look at this. Oh my God. Oh, guys, this is awesome. Oh, he rolled down the window. Oh, he spit at him. Oh, hit his car. Oh! Oh my God! That's what you get! All on video, buddy!
So as I was preparing and writing this message, I kept on thinking about road rage. And I love when people get their due in a situation when they have road rage, the other person's keeping their calm, and the other person just loses control, and it affects them. But the truth is, if you've ever been in a situation with some road rage, it's like no laughing matter. Like, it's pretty scary. It's pretty intense. You don't know what to do. And here's the sad reality in that situation is that more than likely those people, they got road rage, right? Got angry and responded in a very unhealthy way, caused a lot of damage to their own personal vehicles. More than likely, some of them totaling their vehicles, others damaging in the thousands of dollars, right? And maybe they have insurance, right? $500, deductible, $1,000 deductible. But then on top of that, there's all the difficulties of a rental car and borrowing cars and how do you get around with wheels if you don't have it. It just becomes a whole entire mess. Again, road rage, as funny as those videos are, really is no laughing matter. I know for me, there was a moment where I had some road rage. I don't know where I was a non-believer, so I know where it came from. But there's a part of me, like when I think about that moment, really don't know where it came from. I remember I was just driving and someone was passing me up, and I didn't want them to pass me up. And I remember just gunning it, and I had a little kind of beat up old car that couldn't move very fast, and they had like a little, that was in the days of like Fast and the Furious first started, so everybody wanted to have a car like Fast and Furious. So this car just zooms on by past me, and I remember just yelling, screaming, cussing, and things like that because this car passed me up. And I remember the people in my car were scared and things like that. Like, road rage isn't a funny thing. Like, I don't know why my mind went to road rage, right? So I just started Googling information about road raging, right? 31% of drivers witness other drivers signaling rude hand gestures to other drivers in the act of road rage. If you live in Houston, that's probably like 100, like 99.8. Like that, there is no 31 here in Houston. All right, but then continue to look at 92% of drivers have witnessed an act of road rage in this past year. So if you drive here, more than likely, right, you have witnessed somebody experience road rage on the road. A total of 12,610 injuries and 218 murders have been attributed to road rage over a 7-year period in the United States. And then here's I thought this one was kind of sad. 30% of murders are annually linked to road rage. I don't know if y'all remember, right? There's I think last year during the World Series, a father takes his 13-year-old boy to the game. They're at the game, they're having fun. Someone has an act of road rage because they went into their lane, and the person got upset, mad, angry, and then before you know it, he started firing shots and killed the 13-year-old boy. Like, this happens all the time. We are an angry generation. It's not only road rage, man. I could have picked any other topic that I think we're familiar with. I could have picked Karens, right? Right? Karens have been on the rise. At the same time, I know fellas can be Karens as well. I tried to look it up. I had no idea it's a debate. It's between Kevins or Kins. I've also saw Steves, right? But like there's Steves out there as well, right? It could have been a compilation of anything, of any individuals, right? We have become an angry generation. And we're all of us one bad day from becoming a Karen or a Kevin or a Ken or whatever like that. NPR actually did a study a few years back, and this was before COVID, mind you. All right, so this is statistics pre-COVID. I really truly believe we've become angrier since COVID, right? But 84% of Americans surveyed during this time, they viewed themselves angrier than previous generations. Like, we see ourselves as angry people. Just a lot of different things have gotten them angry, whether it be other people, it be news, their neighbors, social media posts, things like that. Then another survey that was done closer to this time said that anger is reaching at a record high. And here's the fact, and here's just like a truth, we all have some anger within us. I know for me, like I'm just like my testimony, if I could just share a little, I was a very angry guy pre-Jesus. I hear all the time, like when I do ministry events, stuff like that, and I kind of maybe outburst a little bit and be like, "Oh man, Sly, you're angry." Like, I'm like, no, that wasn't angry for me. It's like you've never seen me angry. I think the only person that I know, like that I still interact with, that I've seen me at my angriest, is probably my wife. And I remember like even telling people like all the time, like when I first became a Christian, like, oh man, I praise Jesus because Jesus took away all my anger. And then I got married. And then I got caged in with this beautiful Puerto Rican woman who is half my size. But man, when we go at it, she can be twice as mean and love her to death. And, you know, she began to bring something out of me that I thought was completely dead, completely gone. And then obviously the Holy Spirit has worked in me and worked in my life. And I'm thinking, okay, I kind of defeated anger again, and then I have kids. And then they keep me up all night, and I don't sleep, and things like that. And some of y'all see me kind of get upset with JJ, like, JJ, get over here right now. Like, you know, like you've seen that. We all have some anger within us. And so tonight, we're really looking at our sixth deadly sin, which is wrath, or another way to talk about it is as anger. And it's kind of funny, like John preached about this, and as I'm hearing him preach about this, I'm like, okay, great. Like, I got to follow up that. Like, what a great sermon. Like, I don't know, man. I'm really impressed with John. I think he's such a great communicator, the way he manages the text and looks away from his notes and doesn't say ums and like I do all the time. Like, I'm so impressed by him. So just know that if you want a better sermon on anger and bitterness, like just walk out right now. I'll pull it up on YouTube and watch John. I'm telling you, it's 10 times as better than what we're going to talk about here. But at the same time, I believe the Holy Spirit has put something in my heart to talk about with you today. And maybe you're here tonight and you struggle with anger. And maybe it's not the hey, what are you looking at type of anger. You're like, what you looking at? Like maybe it's not that type of anger. but you feel this thing boiling up deep inside of you. And from time to time, you have a little outburst. You kind of get upset. You kind of get a little angry. You say some things that you don't want to say. Or honestly, you have some relationships that have taken serious damage because of your anger. Or whatever the situation may be, it may be anywhere in between. So tonight, we're going to examine anger and how it damages us and how we can overcome the effects of anger. Because anger doesn't only affect us. Literally, like you look at stress rates and stuff, heart attacks, there's tons of studies that show you being angry damages you, like physically, damages you spiritually, but it also damages others in relationship with others. And so really got 3 little points. That's just me. It's Son of the Baptist in me. Please forgive me. We're going to look at the anger within us, the anger within us, the anger that comes out, and then my last point, the anger that turns to forgiveness. So if you have your Bibles, open up to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4. To give you some context about Ephesians, like I've taught about Ephesians before with some people here in the room. Ephesians was probably our closest thing to like a mega church, or it'd be the church that had all the kind of superstars that we read in the Gospels. They would more than likely attend this church. The teaching and the belief is that the mother of Jesus, Mary, more than likely attended this church. John, more than likely, that's where he took her. So John would attend this church. Like even if you go to Ephesus today, there's a house that they believe Mary had lived in with John, because John accepts her as a son. Jesus, knowing the future, knowing that James is going to die as a martyr, Jesus' brother, knowing that some of other Jesus' brothers were going to die a martyr's death. So he gives it to John, knowing that John's going to see her through to her old age. So this church is a very, more than likely, a booming church. It's in an area, and it's going in an area where the letter's going to be, shared amongst different houses, kind of in the countryside and things like that. So think about like the letter hitting downtown, and then after a while, it would make it at FPP. And after done with FPP, it would make it to Sugar Land. After Sugar Land, it would make it up to Tomball. It would kind of do its route, and it would kind of go around everywhere. And so this is what Paul has to say. Paul in this time as well, may I add, was in prison. And so this is what he says. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Like I mentioned, Paul was unjustly put in jail. He was more than likely in a house arrest, could have been in a prison. And here's this guy who was in prison, mind you, if you want to read and find out why, it breaks in detail in the book of Acts. He had a strong desire to preach the gospel to his people, the Jewish people. You'll even read in the book of Romans, actually, he'll even tell you there's moments where I wish I was accursed. There's moments where I wish I would go to hell. I don't think he literally means that. But he's communicating with such passions, like I want my people to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. The Jewish people to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Well, what ends up happening is he goes back to Jerusalem. They know he's going back. And so they basically have a coup, they lock him up, and he just happens to share, hey, I'm a Roman citizen, I bought it. So instead of killing them, which they're about to do, they're on their way of doing, they said, okay, wait a minute now we have to try him like a Roman citizen, which is a completely different standard. And so he basically gets locked up and gets moved from place to place. And so he's more than likely writing from, again, either a house arrest or a Roman jail, and he's writing to these people. He's writing to a group of brand new Christians. And he's writing because he's locked up, because he desires with everything in his heart to share the gospel with the people that put him in jail. Like, let that sink in a little bit. Like, if anybody had the right to be angry, it's this guy. Man, I'm just trying to share the gospel with them. Why are they throwing me in jail? Like, that ain't right. Now, forget them. I want all of them to burn in hell. No. He says, may I be accursed for my brothers to hear the gospel. There's no anger. There's no, this isn't fair. But he's challenging other believers that he loves and cares for to not be angry. All these different words, all is just essentially anger, but in different forms. Anger that we're displayed in different ways. But it's all in different ways, different forms of anger. And he wants them to instead put all these things away, all dealing with anger in all its different forms. Now let me take a break real quick. I do want to separate two different types of anger. We see Jesus get angry and he goes into the temple, he flips some tables, he grabs some whips and things like that. And that anger is justified. I think when we see injustices on TV, or we have somebody that we really, really care about be hurt or experience an injustice, there's everything within us okay to be angry at those things. And it's okay for us, I think, sometimes to be angry when someone harms us and hurts us, and we're completely innocent in that situation. At the same time, some of us, when we do get hurt, we have to be mature enough to really examine, hey, was I justly hurt or unjustly hurt? Was I unjustly hurt or unjustly hurt? And there's different situations and variances and things like that can completely complicated. But all that to say is that there is some righteous anger that I think it's okay for us to display. If someone hurts us in a way that's unkind, against what the way God wants us to, man, I think there's a moment we can do that. I think where we're to avoid is the bitterness that it may form, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But I think if you see an injustice on the TV, you're watching TV and you see some injustice, and everything within you gets angry, man, I think that's all right. You have a loved one that you care about, and they get hurt by someone else, get fired unjustly, experience something horrible unjustly. There's some righteous anger that can appear there. But Paul isn't talking about that type of anger. What he's talking about here, he's talking about that anger that's within us, that we get angry, maybe sometimes for just reasons, or maybe that anger that, man, we have been hurt unjustly, but we let it do something in our hearts that it gets really, really bad. He says, put away. He says, put that stuff away, get it out, move it out. It's this idea of really, it's beginning to build up, and we grab it as it's built up. We grab it and we have to move it away. It's something that's building within us. Anger is internal for all of us. Anger isn't just kind of this outside thing that happens. Anger isn't, oh man, like this person, cut into my lane, didn't put a turn signal on, right, and then gave me the middle finger. And so I got angry because of that. No, that anger has been inside of you. Someone's been getting on your nerves and you just kind of lash out and like, oh man, I don't know where that came from. No, like that is coming from inside you. Jesus said it himself in Mark 7:21 through 23. He says this, from within, out of the heart of man come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these things come from within and they defile a person. Jesus is letting us know that anger, that unrighteous anger, that not good anger comes from within us. It starts with us. It comes from within. Paul will actually say it another way in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15. And I truly believe Paul wrote the book of Hebrews. We can debate that another day. But this is what he says in 12:15. He says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. Grace is a gift that we don't deserve. Some of y'all remember my slap analogy. I tell a lie to you, right? Hey, listen, it's not a good thing if I lie to you. But man, if I lie to, my taxes, it's going to be big time problem. Huge problem. Huge ramifications. Get put in jail. There's levels to this. So when you lie to an almighty, all-powerful, all-holy God, right, then you got to understand that's an even bigger problem than we can imagine. So we are to, in turn, show the grace of God to others. When someone harms us and hurts us, we are to in turn show grace. And that's what he's trying to communicate. And so then this is the back part of that verse. He says that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. The analogy that he's using is the idea of roots. Roots grow deep into the ground. And sometimes you don't see roots. Like my house, I bought a newer house 2 years ago. It was just a field. And they had a little plow truck thing, looked fun to drive. And I remember literally when I would go see the house, they would come and drive it around and scrape all dirt and grass and throw into a big pile. And they come and throw in new dirt, and then they throw on some sod, and all of a sudden, grass grew and they watered it. But as time has moved on, 2 years in, some roots that were deep in the ground began to spring up right on up. He's saying, hey, root of bitterness. Bitterness is like that. It's this root that's deep inside of us. And if it begins to grow, here he says it defiles you. Throughout time, if you let the root of bitterness grow, give it time, it's going to mess you up. It's going to display itself in a way that's not right. And it may not look like you have anything above. It may look like grass. It may look like St. Augustine grass. But give it enough time, and you'll start seeing some weeds. And they're deeper than you can imagine. Some people argue, even kind of dealing with this idea of bitterness, even just kind of tied in what I was talking about earlier regarding the passage in Ephesians. They tie that idea that all bitterness and everything else that he says in Ephesians chapter 4, wrath, anger, clamor, slander, that he's trying to say that, hey, that word bitterness essentially is kind of describing all those other words. So here, Paul is telling us in Hebrews as well, hey, listen, don't give root to any type of bitterness. That's that anger that's deep within us. It's inside us. It's a root that's growing. And what it ends up happening is that it grows and it displays itself as a weed. It displays itself in its fruit of lashing out on others, being passive aggressive, breaking relationships and friendships. And the truth is, guys, like many of us, we gaslight ourselves. Well, they made me angry because they didn't invite me to their party. Well, they made me angry because they said something about me and I didn't appreciate that. They made me angry because, and we X, Y, and Z, and whatever it is. They made me angry because they cut in with me without turning the turn signal on. Oh, they made me, and the truth is for all of us, we're just gaslighting ourselves. Because that anger is just displaying something that's going on within our hearts. It's displaying something that's happening within us. It's us. We're the bitter ones. We have this anger within us. It's a heart issue. And so like I've been mentioning, we need a heart doctor to address this heart issue. Augustine famously quoted about bitterness. He said, bitterness is like taking poison and hoping the other person dies. Are you a person that's harboring bitterness? Are you a person who displays bitterness? Are you a person who shows bitterness? And listen, guys, here's the truth. Some people have some deep hurts here, and you haven't found healing from it. Some of y'all experienced some things that I can only imagine, and I probably couldn't. Some deep things, some hurtful things, some horrible things. And this stuff, all it does is it grows. It grows, it grows, it grows. And all it does is it displays itself as anger. Like no one wakes up in the morning and chooses to be angry. No one wakes up and chooses to be a cynic. No one wakes up in the morning and is just angry, desires to be angry all the time. It's a deep hurt that's coming from within. It leads me to point number 2, that because it's within and it's this root that grows, it eventually pops out of the ground and begins to display. It's anger that comes out. And different hurt comes out in different ways. Like weeds, right? There's different types of weeds. And this hurt begins to show itself and display itself in many, many ways. Some of y'all, it is road rage. Someone cuts in, doesn't put a blinker on, it frustrates you. And what messes things up is that you have a little Jesus fish on the back of your car, and so people are like, what? Like, this person's giving the middle finger and they're a Christian? In my old ministry, man, everybody wanted a sticker for like our ministry with our logo. And I never wanted to put one on the back of my car because every once in a while, man, I drive kind of chaotic. Don't want people to know, like, this is where I can find this guy. Right? Another, hey, listen, a friend doesn't invite you to their event. So it turns into passive aggressiveness. You begin to become very passive aggressive towards them. You don't text them, you don't invite them, you don't do life with them. Others, you've gone through a breakup that's really hurt you. And then you begin to get on social media and let the whole entire world know how this person has began to hurt you. The scariest one out of all of these is like that person that begins to internalize their anger. And I think the truth is many of us internalize our anger. If we could be just honest, like some people are like, oh, I show my anger outwardly, and that you just choose to show your anger inward. No, I think all of us choose to show. We all will have moments, certain things that will let us outburst and show our anger outwardly. But a lot of us, we have this anger that we begin to just internalize. And that's that anger that hurts us the most. That's that anger that hurts us the most. Something was taken from you that shouldn't have been taken from you. Someone that said they will always be there, and they weren't there. A parent that said, hey, I love you, I will always be there for you, and they really weren't. That's that anger that we internalize, the one that's deepest to us, the one that hurts us the most. And it may look like an outburst weed from time to time, but these things grow deeper roots and begin to control us, and it begins to get dangerous. It becomes extremely dangerous because what it begins to do, it begins to break our relationship with others. Here it says Matthew chapter 5, you have heard it said, again, Sermon on the Mount, we're going back, taking it back. You have heard it was said of these days of old, you should not murder, and whoever murders, it will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to accountable, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So here's what Jesus is beginning to say, that if you are holding on to this anger, right, he begins to equate anger with murder. He's beginning to let you know, like, hey, listen, these things are a whole lot deeper. These actions that are displayed are a whole lot deeper. They're deep internal actions. And so before someone murders somebody, it's anger, it's bitterness that's been building, and boom, it finally displays itself in murder. So Jesus is letting you know right here, right now, that if anybody is angry with his brother, they're going to be held to judgment. He'll even take it a step further. He says, whoever insults, so like when we get really angry and someone's really hurt us and we begin to the relationship begins to break, right? And things no longer are the way. And we begin to insult them. We say, well, they're really angry with us because they're immature. Or, hey, listen, they really don't like me because they're dumb or something. Oh, they're just jealous of me. Like, look at me, how great. Like, whatever that thing may be. He's saying, hey, that person right there, they'll be liable to counsel. Like, you need to bring that person up in front of the whole entire congregation and bring them up and say, hey, listen, what they're doing isn't right. And then he takes a step further. If you go into that person, because when we get really, really angry, and it displays itself in an outward way, when we go into somebody's face and say, hey, listen, you're ugly, I don't like when it becomes that way, when here he's saying, you fool, you add whatever your favorite insult is. He says, hey, that person is liable to the hell of fire. He's saying this, listen, the angry person isn't like what Paul said in Hebrews, isn't showing grace. Is beginning to show something, is beginning to show that they have not been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And here's the crazy thing that he begins to do, and he takes a step forward here. He begins to put human relationships, it's just very, very weird, but it's one of the few times that he does this. He begins to put human relationships before spiritual relationships. Like, wait a minute, like, Sly, isn't God number one? Like people talk about like who's most important in your life. In your life, you're supposed to say Jesus number one, and then Jesus number two, and then Jesus number three, and then at the very end, you're supposed to say my mom, my dad, or in my case, my wife, my kid. Like, right? Like, isn't that the situation? But no, Jesus does it completely different. He puts a human relationship before the most important relationship being the one with him. He says this, so if you're offering your gift at the altar, And there remember that your brother has something against you. He says, leave your gift there at the altar and go and be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. So back in those days, the way they did offerings, they would grab a sheep, a goat, a cow, calf, some pigeons, or whatever. And they'd say, hey, you leave that animal there at the altar. Tie that sucker up. Can you imagine, like, you're going to sacrifice your animal, you see this random animal there, like, yo, this is weird. Do I take this animal? Like, is this animal mine? Is it a 2-for-1 deal? Like, what's going on? But it's because you're supposed to leave your gift right there and go repair your relationship. So for the equivalent for us is before you come into this room and worship on a Tuesday, or go into the big room and worship on a Sunday, or before you go serve, or before you go feed the homeless, or before you go on a mission trip, or before you do any of those different things, if you have an issue with your brother, you're supposed to stop what you're doing and go repair that relationship. And then you go worship. Before you lead a Bible study, before you help out in tech, before you greet somebody new walking into the door, he says, hey, stop what you're doing and go repair what you're doing. Repair your relationship with your family. He uses the word very cleverly, brother. Greek is brother and sister. It's sibling. It's a better translation. He says, hey, you stop and you go repair. Then you go back and then you worship. Because here's the thing, God, Jesus, is completely aware of something right here in this passage that is true, I think, for all of us. That when we begin to let anger and bitterness begin to take form, I'm just going to quote D. Marv, who used to be over the porch. He says, sinful anger shows up in broken relationships. And the truth is, if you have anger and bitterness within your heart, you can't really love God well. What is the greatest commandment? Love God. And what's the second one? Love people. Love God and love people. He makes it as one command. And like I said about Augustine has famously said, bitterness is like you taking the poison and hoping the other person dies. The truth is, guys, bitterness, unforgiveness, this anger, all it does, it damages you. Like, listen, John's sermon was great. I think D. Marv's sermon also on this is like excellent as well. And he says something when I was researching, and I like to watch sermons, I like to read commentaries and do different things like that. But man, just something about his just kind of drew me to it. He used a pretty interesting analogy with the fence and things like that, but just to kind of summarize it. He talks about like when he does premarital counseling with the couple. And I'm stealing from this, so if any of y'all get married and say, hey, Sly, would you do a premarital counseling? Just know that this question is going to come up. But he asked them a question. He asked the couple, he'll ask them if either one has held on to bitterness towards someone else. And he says that if someone answers yes, he says, I won't marry you. He says he won't marry them. Why? He goes, because those hurts eventually come up and affect the marriage. They'll affect the marriage. Because the truth is 85% of y'all guys will be married by the age of 35. That's a good percentage of all of y'all. But because of these hurts that are deep within you, you begin to learn that you just hold on to this hurt, you begin to build it up, and you never correct it. And so then you completely feel justified within your hurt. And all that hurt does is that it builds more and more resentment. It's beginning to grow more and more roots. And all it begins to do is that it begins to break up more and more relationships. And the reason why most couples divorce is because there's a situation that happens within the marriage. Resentment begins to build up. It begins to create a wall. It begins to create a divide. And that thing gets bigger and bigger, wider and wider. And because things never repair, the hurt continues to exist. Nothing ever gets fixed. And the relationship breaks. Anger damages you. And listen, the truth is, guys, some of y'all have some deep hurts, man. Like, I know it. Some of y'all have shared y'all stories with me. Some, man, statistically, I know some things, like, right? Many of y'all probably been bullied as a kid. And so you have this anger and resentment that's been building up. The way it displays itself is that you have this goal, you're going to go to college, you're going to get this physical appearance, you're going to have this success, so you can prove everybody wrong so that one day you can get that opportunity to be in front of that person and say, hey, look, I made it. Others, your dad walked out. Your dad walked out on you. So you refuse to let anyone in. You refuse to let anyone get close. And the moment someone gets close to you and you begin to kind of build some type of relationship, you begin to push them out. Because you always find a way for them to hurt you, because you know what? Eventually everybody's going to hurt you anyway, so might as well you be the one to do that. Some of y'all have probably been abused. Ladies, more than likely, statistically, some of y'all may have been abused by a man, someone that you were close to. So then in turn, it casts this negative light towards all men. And I see it all the time displayed. Maybe it's physical abuse, maybe some emotional abuse or whatever like that. But the way I see it displayed is so many young ladies that when we talk about relationships, talk about men like, oh, guys, no. Like all guys are evil pigs and things like that. I'm like, wait a minute, not all guys. And people think I'm typically justifying myself. But man, like I've seen some old cats in here that are faithfully pushing their wives in their wheelchairs and taking them and feeding them. But those guys are pigs? Come on now. No, the truth is that you've experienced some real hurt. It's not that you don't want companionship. It's that you've been hurt. And those hurts are real. And it damages you. And this root, it will grow. And listen, you can rip off the tops. You can go to somebody and just apologize. Hey, I'm sorry for outbursting like that. Hey, I'm sorry for doing all this kind of stuff. You could do all that, but it will continue to reappear. It'll continue to grow. It's like I heard this story about these jungles in Africa. I forget exactly where it was. But there's these jungles in Africa that some rich people from the West wanted to come in and like just build. They wanted to build these big old homes, big old mansions. They were buying for cheap. And so they would just kind of tear down, again, kind of like the little tractor thing like I mentioned about my house. They would come in and just kind of tear down these trees and these weeds and things like that and build these beautiful homes. And they'd do it super, super cheap because the square footage was super, super cheap. They could buy acres for super, super cheap. And they wanted to kind of just live in Africa. You know, they had business or they're seeing those booming economy and beginning and just begin to do that. But what they began to find out as these homes were being built, they couldn't hold the jungle back. These weeds would begin to just appear in the middle of the living room. Trees would just begin to pop up. Things that they thought they completely killed would begin to kind of come up. Why? Because the roots were so deep for so long that the jungle just came and took over. That's the truth with us. We have so many deep weeds within us, it's just going to take over. Worsby famously said, an unforgiving spirit is the devil's playground. And before long, it becomes the Christian's battleground. So if it is an unforgiving, is the devil's playground, if it's the battleground for the Christian, then okay, then what do we do? Like, what's the option? What's the alternative? And so here's my last point: anger that turns into forgiveness. Matthew chapter 18 is one of the greatest chapters on forgiveness as well. Just because due to time, can't fully dive in, but let me just kind of break down the gist of it. Starting around with verse 21, Peter always kind of put his foot in his mouth. He always wanted to seem like he was a super Christian. He's like the typical kid in Sunday school that had all the right answers and got all the attaboys and all the stickers in Sunday school. And so Peter was trying to get some more stickers in Sunday school. And so he goes to Jesus and says, hey, Jesus, how many times should we forgive? Should we forgive? Like forgive our brothers? What does forgiveness look like? As he goes and he throws in the number 7. Should we forgive them 7 times? Now, this is big in this culture because a good Jewish person taught 3. The Pharisees and the rabbis would teach that a good Jewish person would forgive another person 3 times. 3 strikes and you're out at the old ball game. So Peter, more than likely knowing some numerology, knowing that 7 is a holy number, says, hey, do we forgive them 7 times? Kind of making himself seem important. Like, look, Jesus, I'm forgiving 4 more times than the other person. And Jesus says, no, it's 70 times 7. We always forgive. I've had some conversations with some people here, right? And I just want to just clarify some real quick, right? Forgiveness doesn't always mean forget. Man, we look in the book of Revelations, God opens up the book, right, at the end of times, right, and he'll have everything recorded in there, right? I also say all the time that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean trust, right? Trust and forgiveness are 2 completely different things. At the same time, forgiveness doesn't mean that you won't hold somebody accountable. Sometimes someone does something horrendous to us, they need to be held accountable. But what forgiveness is truly doing is that you're giving it to God. You're giving it to God. You won't hold that person accountable. God will. And that may mean the justice system. That may mean even you going to the proper authorities and doing what you'd have to do. So I just want to make sure I clarify that real quick before we move forward. But then Jesus even shares an analogy. He says, hey, there was an individual. Somehow, some way, he was $6 billion in debt. $6 billion. I mean, I don't know, man. This guy, I guess, was doing a war. Like, I mean, I have no idea. Like, $6 billion is a lot of money. And the only thing I've seen here recently is things like the war or master relief or something like that. But somehow this guy racked up $6 billion in debt with his boss, the king. So the king says, hey, man, we're going to lock you up. We're going to sell your family into slaves. And we're going to do this because you owe me all this money. So he goes and he pleads with the king. He says, King, please forgive me. I'm sorry. I am so, so sorry. I can't pay you back. There's no way I can pay back $6 billion. There's no way I can ever make that money. The king decides to show grace. The king decides to show mercy. And he says, okay, you're forgiven. So he's excited. He's happy. It's like, I don't know, man, I wish I would have got my student loans, I paid them off. It would be like me walking out if Michelle's student loans got paid off by the government. Like, I would have been jumping, I would have been leaping, I would have been excited. And on the way of his excitement, probably enjoying a big meal, celebrating with his family, he sees a guy who owes him $1,000. It's about a week's worth of wage. And he sees this guy, and he grabs him, he slaps him up, kicks him, and he tells the officials, arrest this guy because he owes me money. The guy says, man, I can pay it back. Give me some time. Nope, I don't want to hear any of that. Locks him up. Wants his family to be sold so he can get paid back. King hears about this, gets frustrated and angry and calls the guy back. And he says, hey, listen, I forgave you. Why couldn't you forgive that other individual? We have been forgiven much. You look to the cross of Jesus Christ and you see it. We have been forgiven much. So we, in turn, are to forgive others. Again, forgiveness doesn't mean forget. You will definitely probably have to hold some people accountable to some actions. But ultimately, forgiveness is that you're really, truly giving it to God. It's not negating what was said to you or what was done to you. But no longer are you trying to get this justice on your own. You're no longer the one that says, like, listen, I have to be the one to bring this person down. Because here's the reality, like Scripture talks about this all the time. Sometimes there's just individuals that just happen to get away. They hire a good lawyer. They do the things that somebody tells them to do, and they just get out of it. Or sometimes things were done to you. Maybe you were young. You didn't comprehend what was going on or what was happening. Or what they done to you wasn't necessarily illegal, but it's still a real hurt. But Jesus is saying, hey, listen, you give that to me. Because trust me, this won't escape me. Read the Psalms over and over again. God makes it abundantly clear. Listen, these damages will not escape me. I will redeem. I will avenge. And we trust God to be the one who does that. And we in turn forgive. So in my study, I ran across this interesting story that Worsby shared. And he shared this story. He said, a handsome elderly man stopped at my study one day and asked me if I would perform a wedding for him. I suggested that he bring the bride in so that we might chat together and get better acquainted, since I hesitate marrying strangers. Before she comes in, he said, let me explain this wedding to you. Both of us have been married before, to each other, over 30 years. We got in an argument. I got mad. We separated. Then we did a stupid thing and got a divorce. I guess we were too proud to apologize. Well, all these years we've lived alone, and now we see how foolish we have been. Our bitterness has robbed us of the joys of life, and now we want to remarry and see if the Lord won't give us a few more years of happiness before we die. Bitterness and anger, usually over trivial things, make havoc of homes, churches, and friendships. There is no better remedy to anger, to bitterness, whatever you're feeling inside of you, than Jesus. Listen, guys, here's the thing that I don't want you to do. I do not want you to pretend that those things that have happened to you have not happened to you. But what I am saying is, like, listen, you got to take it to the cross, because it's going to break all your other relationships. It's going to affect all your other relationships. Your relationships won't work. And you have to make the decision today. You have to maybe write it in a journal. If you have an opportunity to text or call that individual, maybe speak to them, ask them for coffee or whatever. But you have to go and tell that person, hey, listen, what you did to me, it hurt me. But I've made a decision to take it to God. And you leave it at that. Why? Because our God was unjustly murdered. Our God was unjustly killed. Our God was unjustly tried. And on top of that, like, all of our actions were unjustly put onto him. And he died on the cross for us.